The 3 a.m. override, how to shut off a racing mind in under 5 minutes. It's 3:12 in the morning. You were asleep 20 minutes ago, and now you're staring at the ceiling with your heart going like you just ran up a flight of stairs. Your brain has opened 40 tabs at once. That email you sent on Tuesday, the thing your sister said that you're still not sure was an insult, money, your job, a conversation you're going to have tomorrow that hasn't even happened yet, and you've already lost it 3 different ways in your head. You know exactly how this night ends if you do nothing. You'll check the clock again at 4, then 5. You'll do the math on how many hours of sleep you'll get if you fall asleep right now, and that single thought will be the thing it guarantees you don't. By the time your alarm goes off, you'll feel like you got hit by a car, and you'll spend the whole day running on fumes, promising yourself that tonight will be different. I'm going to give you something you can use the next time this happens, starting tonight if it needs to. It's a 5-minute sequence, and it's not count sheep or put your phone away or any of the advice you've already tried and already knows doesn't work at 3 a.m. This is built specifically for the moment when your mind won't stop moving and your body won't let you sleep. And it works while you're lying right there in the dark, without getting up, without turning on a light, without waking anyone next to you. By the end of this, you'll know exactly what to do the next time your mind decides 3 in the morning is a good time to relitigate your entire life. So stay with me, because this is when you're going to want to remember at 3 a.m., not just right now while you're comfortable and awake. My name is Professor Silas Kincaid, and for a long time now, I've been studying what happens inside a human body and a human mind during exactly this kind of moment. Not in a lab, not in theory, but in the actual dark bedrooms of actual people who couldn't shut their brains off and needed something that worked before sunrise, not something that worked eventually. Here's the principle this whole channel is built on, and I want you to actually hold on to it, because everything I'm about to walk you through only makes sense once you understand this. We take the breath so we can grow the life. That's the whole idea in one line. The breath is the one lever you have direct, immediate physical access to, even at 3 a.m., even when your mind feels completely out of your control. The life is what you get to build on the other side of that lever, once you've learned how to use it. This isn't a slogan I'm reciting, it's the actual mechanism behind every single thing I teach on this channel, including tonight's. Let's talk about what's actually happening in your body when this hits, because once you understand the mechanism, the fix stops feeling like a trick and starts feeling like common sense. A racing mind at night is not really a thinking problem. It feels like one because what you're aware of are thoughts, an endless stream of them, jumping from topic to topic, each one a little more urgent than the last. But underneath that stream is a nervous system that has been activated as if there's something to respond to right now, tonight, in this exact moment. Your body has released stress hormones, your heart rate is elevated, your muscles are subtly tensed, your brain, sensing all of that activation, goes looking for a reason to justify it, and it will always find one. That's why the thoughts jump around so much. It's not that you have 40 urgent problems, it's that your body is in a state that requires a problem to explain itself, and your mind is happy to supply an endless rotating cast of candidates. This is why just stop thinking about it has never worked for you. Not once. Not ever. You're not fighting a thought. You're fighting a physiological state that's generating thoughts faster than you can dismiss them. Trying to think your way out of it is like trying to turn off a fire alarm by arguing with it. You have to address the actual alarm system, not the specific thought it happens to be pointing at tonight. There's a second piece to this that almost nobody explains properly, and it's the part that makes 3 a.m. specifically brutal. During the day, you have distraction. You have a job, a conversation, a task in front of you, something to absorb your attention and keep any one thought from getting too much runway. At night, lying still in the dark, there's nothing competing for your attention. The racing thoughts get the entire stage to themselves, uninterrupted, and they will use every second of it. That's not a personal failure. That's just what happens to a human brain when you remove every distraction and leave it alone with an activated nervous system in a dark, silent room. Your brain isn't malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what an alarmed brain does when nothing else is competing for its attention. So the goal isn't to win an argument with your thoughts. The goal is to bring your nervous system back down out of that alarmed state, because once the alarm turns off, the thoughts naturally lose their urgency and grip on you. That's what the next 5 minutes are built to do. I want you to think of this as a sequence, not a menu. Each stage sets up the next one.
Skipping ahead usually doesn't work as well because your body needs to move through the stages in order. The same way you can't cool down a pot of boiling water by jumping straight to just be calm. You have to actually take the heat off first. Minute 1 is about position and permission. Before anything else, I want you to physically stop trying to fall asleep. This sounds backwards, but it matters more than almost anything else in this sequence. The moment you start actively trying to fall asleep, you've created a new source of pressure. Now you're monitoring yourself, checking in, measuring your progress toward a goal you can't force. That monitoring itself is a form of activation, and it keeps your nervous system exactly where it doesn't need to be. Instead, lie on your back or on your side, whatever's natural for you, and give yourself explicit permission to just be awake for a few minutes. Not forever, just for the length of this sequence. Say it to yourself, even silently. I don't have to fall asleep right now. I just have to lie here and do this. That small shift removes the pressure that's been feeding the very state keeping you awake. You're no longer fighting sleeplessness. You're just doing a sequence. And if sleep happens along the way, it happens as a side effect, not as a demand you're placing on yourself. Minute 2 is where we go to work on the body directly, because the body is what's actually running the show right now, not your thoughts. Here's the breath pattern I want you to use, and it's slightly different from a daytime version, because at night we want something slower and heavier, something designed to pull your system all the way down, rather than just steady it. Breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 4. Hold gently for a count of 7. Exhale slowly through your mouth, longer than you think you need to, for a count of 8. This is a heavier exhale than a normal breath on purpose.
That extended exhale, especially at that length, does something specific. It directly signals the part of your nervous system responsible for rest and recovery, telling your body at a level far below conscious thought that there is no emergency, that it's safe to stand down. Repeat this cycle for the full minute, which usually comes out to somewhere around 4 or 5 full rounds, given how long each one takes. You'll likely notice somewhere around the 3rd or 4th cycle a subtle but real shift, a slight heaviness settling into your limbs, a softening in your jaw and your forehead that you didn't consciously choose. That's not you falling asleep yet. That's your body responding to the one variable you have complete control over in a moment when everything else feels like it's spinning, your own breath. We take the breath so we can grow the life. At 3 in the morning, in the dark, in a bed, exhausted and wired at the same time. This is what that principle actually looks like in practice. Minute 3 addresses the thoughts themselves, but not by fighting them, because we've already established that fighting them doesn't work. Instead, we're going to give them somewhere to go that isn't a spiral. This is the part people are usually most skeptical of until they try it, so stay with me. I want you to picture, as vividly as you can, a single, ordinary, mildly pleasant, low-stakes scene. Not your problems, not tomorrow, something completely neutral. Walking along a familiar path, tidying a room you know well, the specific and boring details of making a cup of tea. The content doesn't matter much. What matters is that it's specific, sensory, and has no emotional charge attached to it. Walk through it slowly, in detail. Notice the texture of things in the scene, the temperature, the small physical sensations of the imagined activity. Here's why this works mechanically. Your racing thoughts are almost always abstract and emotionally loaded. Worries, hypotheticals, unresolved conversations. A slow, sensory, low-stakes scene occupies the same mental space those thoughts were using, but without feeding the activation that's been keeping you awake. You're not suppressing the racing thoughts. You're giving your mind a different job, one that it can only do by setting the old one down. This is the same principle behind the daytime version of this technique I've talked about before, just adapted for a mind that's had all day to accumulate weight and now has nothing else competing for its attention. If a worry thought does intrude, and it probably will at least once or twice, don't fight it and don't panic that the technique isn't working. Just notice it without judgment and gently return to the scene. This happening once or twice is normal and expected. It's not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're doing the sequence correctly and simply need to keep returning, the same way you gently guide a wandering hand back to the wheel while driving, without slamming the brakes over it. Minute 4 is where we deal with the specific problem that keeps introverted, anxious, or highly conscientious minds hostage at night more than almost anything else: unfinished business.
If your racing thoughts kept circling back to something you need to do, decide, or remember, your brain is doing this because it doesn't trust that the thought will still be there tomorrow if it lets go of it now. This is a real functional reason your brain refuses to release certain thoughts, and it deserves a real functional answer, not just a breathing technique. If you have a notepad or your phone within reach, and if you don't, this is worth setting up before tomorrow night, the move is simple. Write down in 3 or 4 words the thing your brain keeps circling. Not a plan, not a solution, just enough to prove to your own brain that the thought has been captured and won't be lost. Call dentist Monday. Ask Maria about the schedule. Check the invoice. That's it. You are not solving the problem at 3 a.m. You are giving your brain proof that it doesn't have to keep holding on to the problem by itself, awake in the dark, as if it's the only safeguard against forgetting. This single move resolves more sleepless spirals than almost anything else in this sequence, because so much of what keeps a mind racing at night isn't really about the content of the thought, it's the fear of losing it. Once your brain has external proof that the thought is safe, held outside of your own vigilance, it very often lets go far more easily than you'd expect. Minute 5 is the final piece, and it's less an action and more a stance you take toward the rest of the night, however it goes. I want you to let go completely of any specific outcome for this sequence. Not, I did the steps, so now I have to fall asleep. Just, I did what I could do. My body is calmer than it was 5 minutes ago, and whatever happens next is simply whatever happens next. This matters more than it sounds like it should, because the moment you turn falling asleep back into a demand you're placing on yourself, you reintroduce the exact pressure that got you here in the first place. Sleep isn't something you can force by trying harder. It's something that arrives on its own, once the conditions are right, the same way you can't force digestion by concentrating on it. Your job was never to make yourself fall asleep. Your job was to bring your body out of an alarmed state and give it the conditions where sleep becomes possible again. You've done that job. What happens next isn't up to willpower, it's up to biology, and biology tends to take care of itself once you stop interfering with it. I want to slow down here for a moment because I know some of you won't fully trust any of this until you understand exactly why it works, and honestly, that instinct serves you well. So let's go through it properly. The first stage removed the pressure of trying, which was itself a source of activation. The second stage directly regulated your nervous system through an extended exhale, one of the only physiological processes in your entire body that operates automatically and yet remains under your conscious control, which is exactly what makes it the fastest and most reliable lever available to you in a moment like this. The third stage gave your mind an alternative, low-charge target, so it no longer had to run on the abstract, high-stakes material that had been fueling the spiral. The fourth stage resolved the specific fear, the fear of forgetting something important that so often sits underneath a racing mind and refuses to loosen its grip until it's directly addressed. And the fifth stage removed the final layer of pressure, the pressure of the outcome itself, so that your body could do what it already knows how to do without your conscious mind standing over it, checking the clock. None of this requires you to become someone who never lies awake at night. None of this promises a perfect, uninterrupted 8 hours every single time. What it gives you instead is something more valuable than a guarantee, a reliable way back to a calmer state whenever your mind decides, at whatever hour, that it wants to run the show. That reliability is what changes everything, because so much of the suffering around sleepless nights isn't actually the wakefulness itself, it's the fear of the wakefulness.
It's lying there at 3 a.m. already dreading tomorrow, already calculating the damage, already convinced there's nothing you can do about it. Once you know you have a real working answer to that moment, the moment itself starts to lose a huge amount of its power over you, even before you've used the sequence a second time. Let me tell you about someone I worked with a while back because I think her situation will sound familiar to a lot of you. She ran her own small business, the kind where the to-do list never actually ends, it just changes shape from day to day. For months, her nights followed the exact same pattern. She'd fall asleep fine around 11 and then wake up like clockwork sometime between 2 and 3, wide awake, heart already going, mind already 3 arguments deep into a conversation that hadn't happened yet. She told me she'd tried everything, cutting off screens an hour before bed, cooler room, weighted blanket, an app that played rain sounds on a loop. All of it helped a little, none of it touched the actual 3 a.m. wake-ups because none of it was built for the moment itself. It was all built for prevention, and by 3 a.m., prevention is no longer the problem you're solving. The first time she tried a sequence like the one I just walked you through, she told me afterward that the breathing felt almost too simple to matter, and she nearly stopped after the first minute out of sheer skepticism. But she kept going, mostly because she didn't have anything better to do at 3 in the morning anyway. By the time she got through the sensory scene in the notepad step, she said something shifted that she couldn't fully explain. Not that she suddenly felt sleepy at all, but that the specific, sharp edge of the panic had dulled. She still didn't fall back asleep for another 20 minutes or so that first night, but she wasn't spiraling anymore. She was just lying there, calm, waiting. By the second week of using it consistently, she noticed the wake-ups themselves started happening less often. Not because the sequence prevents wake-ups. It doesn't, and I want to be honest with you about that. It's not a sedative. What changed was that her body stopped treating the 3 a.m. wake-up itself as something to be afraid of, and a huge amount of what kept her fully awake in the first place had been exactly that fear. The anticipation of another brutal, sleepless stretch layered right on top of whatever thought happened to wake her up. Remove the fear of the wake-up, and the wake-up itself tends to lose most of its teeth. I share that story not because her exact experience is guaranteed to be yours, but because the pattern is common enough that I want you to expect something similar. The first use of this sequence is rarely dramatic. It's usually quiet, almost anticlimactic. The real change tends to show up in the accumulation, the same way it did for her, not as one miraculous night, but as a gradual loosening of the grip these wake-ups have had on you. I also want to flag a few of the most common ways people accidentally work against themselves the first few times they try this, because knowing them in advance will save you some frustration. The most frequent one is checking the clock. I know the pull to check how much time has passed is almost automatic, but every time you check, you're doing math about how many hours of sleep you have left, and that math is one of the most reliable ways to reignite the exact activation you're trying to bring down. If you can, turn your clock away or resist the glance. The sequence works on its own timeline, not one you need to be monitoring. The second common mistake is treating the sensory scene step like a performance you need to get right. People sometimes get frustrated because their mind won't stay on the scene or because they can't picture it as vividly as they think they're supposed to. That's not the bar. The bar is simply returning to it, gently, as many times as it takes. A wandering mind during the step isn't a sign of failure. It's simply what minds do. And the practice is in the returning, not in some flawless, uninterrupted focus you're supposed to achieve on the first try. The third mistake, and this one catches a lot of people off guard, is trying to use this sequence while still holding on to the hope that it will guarantee sleep tonight specifically. I understand the temptation completely. You're exhausted, you want a guarantee, and it's frustrating to be told the goal isn't actually sleep itself. But that expectation quietly recreates the very pressure the fifth stage is designed to release. The sequence works best when you can hold it loosely as a tool for calming your body down and let sleep be whatever happens on the other side of that calm, rather than the thing you're demanding from yourself. I want to say something here that applies far beyond tonight because I think it matters more than the technique itself. A racing mind at night is not a character flaw. It is not proof that you think too much or that you're too sensitive or that something is fundamentally wrong with how your brain is built. It is a nervous system doing exactly what nervous systems do when they've been activated and left alone with nothing to compete for their attention. You are not broken. You are a person whose body needed a tool it never got handed to you, and now you have one. Here's what happens for most people once they've used a sequence like this a handful of times, and I want you to know this going in because it will make the first few attempts easier to trust. The first time, it might not only partially work. Maybe you still don't fall asleep right away, but you notice your heart rate has come down. Your thoughts have slowed even a little. That's not a failure. That's exactly what success looks like the first time your body learns a new pattern. The second or third time you use it, it tends to work faster because your nervous system is starting to recognize the sequence itself as a signal, the same way certain smells or sounds can become associated with calm over time. By the fifth or sixth time, many people find that just beginning the breath pattern is enough to start the whole system winding down almost automatically. You're not just using a technique, you're teaching your own body a new association, one repetition at a time.
This is also why I want you to resist the temptation to judge tonight's attempt or any single night as proof that this does or doesn't work for you. One night is one data point. What actually changes your relationship with sleepless nights is the accumulation of small proofs over time that you have a reliable way back to calm. That accumulation is what eventually makes the dread itself start to fade, because dread requires uncertainty to survive, and you are night by night removing that uncertainty. There's one more thing I want to leave you with, because I think it's the part that actually matters most, long after tonight. So much of what makes 3 a.m. feel unbearable isn't the specific thoughts themselves, it's the feeling of being alone with your own mind, with no tools, no plan, and no way out except to wait it out and hope for the best. What I've walked you through tonight isn't just a technique, it's a proof that you are never actually without options, even in the exact moment when it feels like you are.
That proof is worth more than any single night of good sleep, because it changes how you meet every difficult moment after this one, not just the ones that happen at 3 in the morning. I also want to address something a lot of you are probably thinking right now, even if you haven't said it out loud. Some nights, this sequence will work beautifully, and you'll be asleep again before you've even finished the 3rd minute. Other nights, you'll do every step correctly and still be awake 20 minutes later. I want to be completely honest with you about that, because I don't think you're served by anyone promising you a perfect fix for something as complex as a human nervous system. What this sequence guarantees isn't unconsciousness on command. What it guarantees is that you will end up calmer than you started every single time you actually do it, even on the nights it doesn't put you back to sleep. And a calmer, quieter body lying awake for 20 more minutes is an entirely different experience than a racing, panicked one lying awake for the same 20 minutes. The first is uncomfortable. The second is the kind of night that follows you into the next day and the day after that. If you find that this becomes a regular pattern, several nights a week over an extended stretch of time, I do want to say clearly that a tool like this is meant to sit alongside good judgment, not replace it. Chronic severe sleep disruption is worth bringing to a doctor or a sleep specialist, someone who can look at the fuller picture of what's going on for you specifically. Nothing I've shared tonight is meant to talk you out of getting real support if you genuinely need it. It's meant to give you something solid to stand on in the meantime, and for a great many people, in the moment itself, it's enough. That's the whole idea behind everything on this channel. We take the breath so we can grow the life. Not a life with no hard nights, just a life where a hard night doesn't get to decide who you are the next day, or how capable you are, or what you're allowed to believe about yourself before the sun even comes up. If you've ever lain awake convinced you were the only person losing this particular fight, I want you to know something before we close out tonight. You almost certainly weren't. Most people who seem calm and rested during the day have had their own version of this exact night more than once and simply never mentioned it because it doesn't come up in conversation the way other struggles do. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're just a person who needed a tool nobody handed you until now. I'll leave you with one last practical thought before we close, because I think it's the difference between this being something you watched once and something you actually use. Tools like this work best when they're set up before you need them, not scrambled for in the middle of a crisis. So tomorrow, before it's 3 in the morning again, do 2 small things. Put a notepad or your phone within arm's reach of your bed if it isn't already, so the 4th stage is ready when you need it. And just once during the day, run through the breath pattern from stage 2 while you're calm and fully awake, so your body has already felt it once before it needs to lean on it in the dark. That single rehearsal, done in broad daylight when nothing is wrong, makes an enormous difference in how naturally the sequence comes to you the first time you actually need it under pressure. You wouldn't want to learn how a fire extinguisher works for the first time while something is already burning, and the same logic applies here. Hit subscribe if this gave you something you can actually use the next time your mind decides to run the show at an hour it has no business running. That's exactly why this channel exists. There's another episode I think you'll want to watch next, one that goes further upstream into what actually causes a nervous system to arrive at bedtime already activated in the first place, long before your head even hits the pillow, and what you can do earlier in the evening to keep tonight's 5 minutes from ever being necessary at all.
It covers the small, ordinary choices in the 2 or 3 hours before bed that quietly set the stage for a calm night or a chaotic one. Choices most people never connect to how they actually sleep. I'll leave that one right here for you. Before you go, take one thing with you tonight beyond the sequence itself. The next time your eyes snap open in the dark and your heart is already racing, that moment is not a verdict on how the rest of your night or your day tomorrow is going to go. It's just a moment, and you now know exactly what to do with it. That knowledge alone will change how it feels the very next time it happens, whether or not you ever run through a single one of these 5 steps. Until then, take the breath so you can grow the life. I'll see you in the next one.